Picture this. You're just chilling at home, hanging out with your family. Dinner's almost ready, maybe you're playing a little guitar. Then, a knock at the door. You open it, probably thinking it's a neighbor, right? Instead, it's two undercover FBI agents flashing badges. Now, this isn't some Hollywood script. This is exactly what went down with pop star Jack Avery from the boy band Why Don't We? And the agents, they had a truly terrifying message. Someone had literally just put out a hit on his life. Welcome to our explainer. Today we're unpacking a true crime nightmare that actually pulls back the curtain on some deep, systemic fractures inside our family court system.
Jack actually talked about this whole terrifying encounter in an interview. He said the agents looked right at him and said, "We're the FBI. We think you're a victim of something." I mean, can you imagine? He had zero idea who wanted him dead or even why. He just knew he was being hunted. The fear was absolutely paralyzing. He literally locked himself inside his house for a month, too scared to leave, constantly checking the windows at night. Just this incredibly isolated, deeply paranoid reality. But honestly, the most astonishing part of this whole story, it's who the FBI eventually arrested for this dark web conspiracy.
Fast forward to May 2026, and authorities make their move. And the suspects? They weren't crazed stalkers or industry rivals. No, they were his own family. The FBI arrested Gabriela Gonzalez, a TikTok influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers and, crucially, Jack's ex-girlfriend. But it doesn't stop there. They also arrested her dad, Francisco Gonzalez, who is a Central Florida attorney, along with Gabriela's new boyfriend, Kai Cordry. The whole trio is now facing charges like attempted murder and conspiracy. If they're convicted, we're talking 25 years to life in prison.
Okay, so let's break down the timeline of this murder-for-hire plot, because the mechanics here are just chilling. According to court docs, this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. It actually started way back in 2021. Allegedly, the Gonzalez family hatched a plan to track and photograph Jack out in Hawaii, basically trying to catch him doing something wrong, like drinking or smoking. And then it escalated, big time. Prosecutors say Gabriela started looking into using Bitcoin on the dark web to hire a hitman. The goal? Stage a fatal car crash. Her dad, Francisco, allegedly sent 10 grand to the new boyfriend Kai, disguising it as, quote, web development transactions to front the cash for the hit. A few months later, they requested another $4,000. But the whole plot fell apart in September 2021. Kai unknowingly tried to finalize the details of the hit with an undercover federal agent who was just posing as an assassin.
Now you're probably sitting there wondering, why, right? What actually drives a successful lawyer and a famous influencer to allegedly mastermind an assassination? Well, prosecutors say it wasn't about money, it wasn't about fame, it was about a bitter, deeply toxic custody dispute over Jack and Gabriela's 7-year-old daughter, Lavender. Gabriela and her dad allegedly got so fixated on getting full custody that one witness recalled Francisco saying it would just be, quote, cheaper if Avery were dead.
And, you know, the red flags were definitely there. Gabriela's estranged husband, Cody Claiborne, actually ended up being a key witness here. Before the arrests even happened, he posted on social media about the extreme lengths her family was going to. He wrote, "She already alienates his own daughter from him. I saw the awful things they do and say about him." Now, I want you to pay very close attention to one specific word in that statement, alienates. Because while this whole story feels like some crazy pop culture anomaly, this true crime nightmare is actually just a micro-level extreme of a massive, systemic legal battlefield that's playing out in family courts literally every single day.
So what exactly drives a custody battle to the point of a murder-for-hire plot? To really grasp the desperation and the underlying legal mechanics happening here, we need to zoom out. We're going to step back from the sensational headlines for a second and dive into some highly objective, macro-level academic research that governs family disputes all across the country.
And that brings us to this incredibly controversial concept, parental alienation. Originally, back in the 90s, they called it parental alienation syndrome. Basically, it's the theory that when a child resists seeing one parent without a supposedly good reason, it's because the other parent, the one the child prefers, is illegitimately brainwashing or alienating them. Now, in family courts today, this concept gets weaponized constantly. It's frequently used by one parent to completely discredit the other, especially when claims of abuse or unsafe living environments are brought up.
To really understand just how massive of an impact this concept of alienation has in a courtroom, we're going to look at a landmark 10-year empirical study done by the George Washington University Law School. And guys, this wasn't some tiny sample size. The researchers meticulously combed through over 4,300 U.S. appellate and trial cases spanning an entire decade. So this gives us a highly credible, purely objective, nationwide picture of exactly what happens when parents accuse each other of abuse and alienation.
Section 1. Weaponizing alienation claims. What the data shows about abuse allegations.
So the GW study wanted to measure strict judicial outcomes. Specifically, how often do family courts actually believe, or in legal terms, credit, mothers when they claim the father is being abusive? Looking neutrally at the baseline findings, the numbers are pretty sobering. When mothers make claims of abuse, courts believe them less than half the time. Domestic violence claims, credited 45% of the time. Child physical abuse claims drop down to 27%. And claims of child sexual abuse, those are accepted by courts only 15% of the time. Now keep those baseline numbers in the back of your head.
Because we have to ask the big question here. What happens to those already low numbers when a father defends himself not just by denying the abuse, but by turning around and accusing the mother of parental alienation? What actually happens when he tells the judge, hey, I'm not abusive, she's just brainwashing the kid against me?
Well, the data here brilliantly and kind of shockingly shows the immense legal power of an alienation claim. When a father cross-claims alienation, it puts a massive thumb on the scale. The court's belief in the mother's domestic violence claims drops from 45% down to 37%. Belief in child physical abuse drops to just 18%. Basically, courts become significantly more likely to just completely disbelieve a mother's abuse claims across the board.
But honestly, the most chilling statistic in this entire 10-year study is this: 2%. When a mother alleges child sexual abuse and a father responds by claiming she's alienating the child, courts believe the mother in exactly 1 out of 51 cases. That is a 2% crediting rate. Section 2. The gender gap in court. Who loses custody? So, if a court decides a mother is making up abuse just to alienate the father, what actually happens next? What happens to the child? Well, the data reveals a startling gender disparity. When a mother alleges abuse and there's no alienation claim involved, she loses custody to the father about 26% of the time. But if that father simply claims she's committing parental alienation, her risk of losing custody nearly doubles. It jumps to 50%. Half the time, the mother's losing custody to the exact person she's accusing of being abusive.
And if the judge actually credits the father's alienation claim, meaning the court officially believes the mother is an alienator, the outcomes are devastating. Mothers lose custody 73% of the time. And in the most extreme scenarios, where mothers allege both physical and sexual child abuse and the court believes she is alienating, mothers lose custody 100% of the time. The researchers came to a really stark conclusion. They wrote, simply, alienation trumps abuse. Literally, even when courts believe a father has been abusive, if they also think the mother is an alienator, they frequently just go ahead and give the abuser custody anyway.
The study also looked at whether this dynamic goes both ways. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. The impact of alienation in abuse cases is highly gendered. Mothers who are accused of alienation by fathers they claim are abusive lose custody 50% of the time. But when you flip the roles, when fathers are accused of alienation by mothers they claim are abusive, those fathers lose custody only 29% of the time. The data clearly shows it serves as a powerful tool that is predominantly wielded against mothers.
However, to keep things completely impartial here, the study does point out one very important caveat. In family court cases where no abuse is alleged by either side, the whole concept of alienation operates very differently. In those non-abuse cases, the researchers found that alienation outcomes are virtually identical for both men and women. So the data suggests that without the complicating factor of abuse claims thrown into the mix, alienation actually has a highly gender-neutral impact on who wins or loses custody.
But the stakes in these courtrooms, especially when abuse is alleged, literally couldn't be higher. This systemic disbelief mapped out in the GW study has real-world and sometimes fatal consequences. In fact, researchers have verified that at least 101 children in the U.S. have been killed by a separating parent, despite family courts being specifically warned of the danger beforehand. And you know, it's exactly within this intense pressure cooker of disbelief, parental rights, and alleged alienation that the extreme desperation of the Jack Avery and Gabriela Gonzalez case was born. A custody battle over a 7-year-old escalated to dark web searches, Bitcoin payments, and the FBI having to step in just in time to stop a murder.
We've seen how the data shows abuse claims are routinely dismissed. We've seen how custody disputes can breed unimaginable conspiracy and violence. And it all leaves us with this incredibly fragile, haunting balance between parental rights and child safety. It really forces us to step back and ask one final question. When you look at the empirical data of family courts and the absolute extreme lengths parents will go to when they feel the system has failed them, if this system is fundamentally designed to protect the vulnerable, Who is actually being protected?